Hello, hello.
Hello.
Are you here? Oh, good that you're tuned in. It's the Paul Leslie Hour because we needed you here. Yes, indeed. It's episode number 1077, and we're pleased to welcome back John Primerano for his second appearance here. Now, Mr. Primorano is a Philadelphia-based pianist, songwriter, singer, recording artist, actor, and author. He released a dandy record album called Somewhere South of Heaven, and he's considered royalty around here. You hear that theme music playing of The Entertainer? Well, that's John playing. Yep. And folks, we'd like to encourage you to help keep our show going. Just visit thepaulleslie.com/support. And you know what else you can do? Tell someone who you think would appreciate this episode and all about it. We thank you. Let's bring out John Primerano. You're gonna love him.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is my great pleasure to welcome back for a second time John Primerano, a pianist, singer, songwriter. As a recording artist, he has an acclaimed release, Somewhere South of Heaven. He's an author who's contributed to several books, mostly about music. He's also appeared in some films, so he's an actor as well. There's another distinction that John Primerano has. The beginning and end of every episode of this show features the piano playing of John Primerano on every single episode, something I'm very proud of. I'm honored to welcome yet again a very talented man, a very nice man, John Primerano. Thank you so much for coming on here.
Thanks for having me again, Paul. I appreciate that. Appreciate your words, too.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. So, if I remember correctly, you've been in Philadelphia your entire life.
Yes, except for many years of entertaining in the South Jersey area where I spent about 6 months of the year eventually down there.
Can you take us back to your early days as a performer and an entertainer? What was it that sparked your passion?
Well, there was one thing that was a defining moment, but I had already decided on what I wanted to do. And I remember when I was a kid, what everybody knows as American Bandstand was just called Bandstand because it came from Philadelphia. And then after about a year, when Dick Clark had it, it went national. I used to watch that after I came home from school, and I always wanted to see who the guest artist was that was going to perform. And I would sit and I'd think to myself, I want to do that. Also, there was Danny Thomas's show, Make Room for Daddy. And a lot of the episodes would end with him in a nightclub. He was supposed to be a comedian, if you remember the show. And a lot of the times he would be performing. And I knew as a kid that there were extras that were around there. But I wanted that same kind of feeling of being in the center of the room and kind of having eyes on me and watching me as I performed. That was when I was very, very young.
Now, speaking of very, very young, can you perhaps just list a few of the artists that you heard on the radio and whatnot that caught your ear, that you thought, I like this music?
Sure. I remember the first song that I heard on the radio, which was Joe Stafford singing You Belong to Me. Yeah. Then as I got older, within the same decade, Bobby Darin came along. Bobby Darin captured the essence of what I wanted to do. That, and around the same time, I saw a motion picture called The Joker is Wild with Frank Sinatra when he was performing in a nightclub with the tuxedo. One of my big goals in life was to wear a tuxedo. I wound up wearing a tuxedo so many nights that, a T-shirt looks better to me now. Those were the things, the type of music that influenced me, because we used to play records, 45s on Saturday afternoons in my house. And we had records from Teresa Brewer, Rusty Draper, Lou Monte. We had songs that were Elvis Presley recordings, all the Darren hits. So it was a pretty diverse kind of pop sound that was going on in the house. All I knew was that I wanted to be one of them, you know?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, there's some difference in our age, John, but
A little bit.
but Bobby Darin was one of the very first songs when I was just a kid. Like, I'm talking like I was 6 years old. I heard Beyond the Sea, and it made such an impression on me. The great Bobby Darin.
Yeah, you know, the melody of that song is a Debussy composition called La Mer, impressionistic composer. It was also a great arrangement. And if I'm not mistaken, I think it was the same gentleman who did Mac the Knife, which was the late Richard West.
Interesting stuff. You have worked with some real icons of music. And then also in your cinematic work, you have rubbed shoulders with people like Sylvester Stallone, but then you worked on the motion picture Philadelphia, starring Tom Hanks. I'm curious, what artistic lesson or what life lesson have you learned as a result of working with and rubbing shoulders with legends?
It's a good question, very good question. Because first, when I was about 15 years old, I worked on a program with Jimmy Durante. It was a celebration of Police Athletic League in Philadelphia. And he was working at a famous supper club in South Philadelphia, Palumbo's. And between shows, they gave me a police escort to come up where we were performing in a very large room. It didn't matter that he was doing a favor for Frank Palumbo or for the police department. He went out there and entertained people like it was a Royal Command performance. And that struck me because, and the other thing was, people backstage were taking pictures with him. And I had no camera, and my folks were sitting in the audience, and there was a rush of people to go backstage. And every time he took a picture, he would get that look and turn it on just like that. And it wasn't phony because he was not a phony guy. He talked to everybody nicely, and he didn't turn a person down who wanted an autograph or a picture. And I thought to myself, this guy's one of the biggest stars in the world, and he's doing this as a favor, and he's not skimping on anything. You know, that was one thing that I can remember most definitely. I put that in the back. I remember one time, my first engagement as a solo performer was, you know, nobody starts at the top, right? Well, this was kind of I wouldn't say the bottom, but you take it from here. I played 7 nights a week. Tuesdays and Thursdays was shrimp night, and Wednesday was amateur night. So anybody that came in there on any night that wanted to get up and be Frank Sinatra for 5 minutes or the length of a song was allowed to do so. And I played for them. And a patron said to me one time, "Why do you knock your brains out for these people?" He said, half of them are drunk. He said, all they want to do is get up there and, you know, just get a little bit in front of the spotlight. He said, "Why do you knock your brains out trying to get a key for them and things like that?" And I said, "Because if I don't, I'm only cheating me." And I think there was a little bit of Jimmy Durante in there. I played for everyone as though I were playing for Frank Sinatra or Perry Como or Dean Martin.
Well, that is class. That's real class. Something that I respect about you very, very much is your incredible fortitude and your hustle. Something that a lot of people, they would look at a record album being made or even an EP, and they think, oh, that's a lot of work. And it certainly is, especially when you consider, in your case, you're a songwriter. Okay, you got to write the songs, and then when you're picking the outside material, you got to learn it, you've got to play it. You're wearing a lot of different hats. In some cases, people are producing it themselves. But something that you understand very well, I think, is that when you make the album, when you've got the CDs in hand, the work really begins, because now you've got to be a promoter. And
Right.
what would you credit this ability that you have to generate exposure? Because I want to tell the viewers and listeners out there, you've appeared in both radio as far away as Hawaii and I believe West Africa, and then also in various newspapers like the Italian Tribune. So yeah, there's my question. What do you credit this ability at generating media and other exposure?
The only thing I could say modestly is contacting people or finding out through making telephone calls who the people are to speak to, and speaking to them, calling them, or speaking to an assistant or something like that. I'll tell you the truth, when I was a kid, I was very shy. And it was very difficult for me to have to make a telephone call to somebody who I didn't know. If somebody called me in regards to an engagement, it took a lot of fortitude for me to call back and speak to somebody that I didn't know, which is a heck of a thing when you stop and think what the business that I wanted to be in. But I thought agents and managers would be around doing that. And agents were around, but agents procured work for you. They didn't handle your career. So I got to thinking that I could do the same thing that they're doing. But it took repetitive, as much as it takes to play piano, to become proficient at an instrument. It took time to do that. And by the time I completed that album you're speaking about, Somewhere South of Heaven, I was a completely different person. You know, I would never say that I was a gregarious person, but I could talk to people. In fact, I said to my family doctor one time, I told him of my anxiety in doing that. And he said, "You want to know how to get over that?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "Call up people you don't know."
Really?
Yeah. He said, "Call people you don't know and keep doing it." And it got to the point where I had some people that were behind me and turned out to be all talk. And so I kind of was left high and dry, and there was only one person to depend on, and that was me. So I figured, if I want this, if I want what's in my head, what I see, I want to be a part of that, then it starts here. It starts with me, and it starts now.
That's very inspiring. So I'm just going to ask you a hypothetical real quick. This has no basis in reality. I just want to know. Let's say that you heard a little whispering and somebody was saying something like, oh, someone in your genre, like Wayne Newton, is interested in recording another album to come out next year. So the wheels start grinding, and what do you do?
I try to figure out, who do I contact to get in touch with Wayne Newton or his people?
Yeah.
You know?
And put your best foot forward.
Right. I read somewhere one time where they said you should have an elevator speech ready. And an elevator speech meant you were supposed to be able to tell somebody about yourself, what you do, and why you're talking to them in 5 seconds. And before I called anybody, I would put something together in my mind, and then I would call them, and I'd give my elevator speech. But I always, I had like rabbit ears, If I heard something like that, I didn't let any grass grow under my feet. My father said to me when I was young, because my folks were very supportive about what I wanted to do, he said to me, don't wait for anybody to knock on your door. So with that piece of advice, I went at it,
I love that. It's actionable for people out there, not just in the music business, but no matter what somebody's pursuing.
Right.
And Woody Allen has a similar outlook to you about picking up the phone, calling people. I want to talk about another side of John Primerano. You're also a writer, and you've written, I've read things that you've written from personal memoir type things, like related to the late President John F. Kennedy, to writing about our favorite subject, music. You contributed to Richard Gruden's book, The Italian Crooner's Bedside Companion. And it's something that I have an interest in. I've been called before the niche of the niche. A lot of times I like to seek out the lesser known Italian American singers. The actor and singer Robert Davi is like that also. But tell us, who do you think is the most underrated of the great American or Italian-American crooners?
Geez, who's underrated? When I stop and I think so many people had gotten publicity for their work and had their work heard. I could say there's a gentleman from, I believe he was from Chicago. His name was Frank Derone, who played guitar and sang, and he did both well. But he was kind of an inside guy, like in the music business. And I think he could have been more well-known and popular had, things broken better for him. If you're talking about someone who's like a household name, who is underrated, maybe Julius LaRosa. Because Julius LaRosa was still singing great into the latter years of his life. But people knew Julius LaRosa. They knew him. He had hit records. But I don't know if people didn't pass him by, and he was more remembered for being fired on the air by Arthur Godfrey than his vocal prowess.
Well, that's definitely one you would hear less, perhaps, if you were at an Italian restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that brings me to this. We've talked on the phone, we've talked in person about another subject that I am fond of. What is your all-time Italian meal favorite, or your favorite Italian-American even meal? What just warms your heart?
I'll tell you, and I think most Italian Americans would be familiar with this. It was called greens and beans. I guess you could say it was a Depression era meal, but it consisted of escarole, or as we said, scuttle, and navy beans, and my mother made it with pepperoni, and it was a soup. And let me tell you, when it was cold out there, she had enough beans and greens to feed the 3rd Marine Division, going. That brings back a lot of memories and also brings back a great feeling, feeling of warmth and security.
Yeah, comfort food.
Right.
Right. Well, it occurs to me, as I'm sure it does to many people, that there are so many Italian things that are just universally loved. The whole world knows the music of Frank Sinatra.
Right.
Then, you could talk about the Italian food. Then you could talk about cinema. You could talk about people like Sophia Loren. What is it about?
I could talk about her for hours.
What is it about Italian people?
I don't know. You're making me think tonight. I'm not used to doing it. What is it about Italian people? They're, for the most part, they're very warm and giving. I had a friend that when I started, I was going to say high school, but the school I went to was a senior high school. And the first kid that I met, his name was John also. Came up and he shook my hand, and we're still friends till this day. And I was godfather to his first son. And he was a pallbearer for both my father and my mother. And one of the things he said was, when you went to the Primorano house, you couldn't leave without eating before you ate something.
Yeah.
So, and that was, we were kids on up. So that's an example of, I think, what you're saying.
Yeah. Things that fill you up and satisfy you. That's what the Italians have brought to the world. Now, I'd like to...
Eat, munch.
Yeah. I'd like to kind of shift gears just a little bit. American music is the world's music, as I was saying. Now, we could say that about a lot of things, from Sinatra to Dean Martin, but there's also, you could say that there's an Italian who was the ultimate North American individual of all times, and I'm talking about Columbus. How do you feel when people in the popular culture today talk about canceling or boycotting Columbus Day, which is coming up in, I think, about 100 days?
I could sum that up in one word: angry.
I was so worried when you said one word. I was like, John, please do not cuss. Don't cuss.
I wouldn't do that to you, Paul. From our telephone conversations, I don't use that kind of language.
Right.
You better pray for forgiveness now.
Right.
No, truthfully, it really irritates me tremendously. So much so that I got a calendar one time a couple of years ago. It was a religious calendar. And the first thing I did, I had been clued into it. They said, look in October and see on Columbus Day if it says Columbus Day or if it says Indigenous Peoples Day or anything else. And sure enough, there was no mention of Christopher Columbus. And this was an organization that I donated to. My donations and my letter, I don't think just my letter had any effect on it. And I certainly don't think that my donations would stop this organization from being in business. But I promised them that they would never get another penny out of me if I didn't see Columbus Day back on the calendar. So a lot of people must have done the same thing, because the following year when the calendar came, Columbus Day was back on there.
It speaks to the power of each person when it comes to their voice.
Yeah, when things like that annoy me, I feel as though I have to make my position known. I used to, for many, many years, I kept quiet. I kept my own personal likes and dislikes to myself until about, I guess in 2020. And then I said I had always subscribed to the Johnny Carson theory of why should I lose 50% of my audience? But I also realized another thing was I was an American first, and I had to state my opinion on some things that were over and above being an entertainer.
Right. In addition to entertainer, I've described you as a pianist, a singer, songwriter, recording artist, performer, author, actor. Who is John Primerano at heart? Who is this guy that we see?
I was born in North Philadelphia. I was born and raised there. It was a working class neighborhood. My father was an iron worker. My mother was a housewife or a homemaker, as they say today. I lived with my maternal grandparents and two aunts, and we were a close family. And no matter where I played, and I played some really nice places, and I met a lot of well-known people and got friendly with some of them. I still say I'm the same guy that came out of 10th and Clearfield, in Philly.
Now, for anybody out there who is interested in the CD, you have a website for JPM Productions. What's your website?
It's actually www.johnprimerano.com.
All right. johnprimerano.com, and people can get in contact with you there. They can find out more about Somewhere South of Heaven, your album. And it's been a great pleasure to do this interview with you. When anybody ever asks me about the theme music that they hear at the beginning, I always mention your name with pride, that is John Primerano playing. It's just a great pleasure to know you And I have to say, I've interviewed many, many people. It's always thrilling to be able to ask people questions. But there are a few interviews that I've done with people where I feel that that person is a close friend. And you are one of those people.
Oh, well, thank you. That means a great deal to me. It really does. And your words. I was very happy to do the recording of The Entertainer. You know, I was watching your interview with Paul Williams and saw the ending with the photo, which I thank you again for that. And believe me, your words do not fall on deaf ears. I really do appreciate that very much.
Yes, sir. My pleasure. Now, anything you'd like to say in closing to all of the people out there?
Well, I hope you all watch the Paul Leslie program, Paul Leslie Hour, especially this segment. But he has a lot of great shows. He's interviewed a lot of great people. I want to thank the people who have been a following of mine for many years. I mean, people who would travel, they'd come up from Maryland, Delaware, come down from Yonkers. And I wasn't always in Philadelphia. You know, like I say, I played up and down the Jersey coast and whatnot, and they would come wherever I played. It never went unappreciated. And I became good friends with some of them, all the people who have followed for years. I never took anyone lightly, and I appreciate them taking their time to come to hear me play or sing a song that they liked.
Well said. Well, John Primerano, thank you so much. It's been a great pleasure, and I will hope to see you in person sometime soon.
My pleasure, and I hope the same thing. You're a little closer now, right? Last time we saw each other, we were in Atlanta, right?
Right,
And
right.
when I can put a little more time in traveling, maybe we can work that out.
All right. Sounds good to me. Until next time.
Until, you know what? I just said that to a friend of mine. Are you familiar with the movie Soldier in the Rain with Steve McQueen and Jackie Gleason?
I don't know if I've seen that one.
That came out in '63. Jackie Gleason, I think, was a master sergeant, and I think Steve McQueen might have been either a buck sergeant or a corporal or whatever, but they were buddies. And every time they would take leave of each other, I forget Steve McQueen's name in it. It might have been Eustace. And he would say, "Until that time, Eustace, until that time."
I like it.
Well, thanks again for having me on the show. It's been a pleasure. It's always a pleasure to be in your company and speak to you on the phone. And you're a busy guy. It's always good to connect with you.
Absolutely.
You know, the Paul Leslie Hour is made possible by people like you, listeners, viewers. Please go to thepaulleslie.com/support, and you'll know what to do when you're there. Thank you. Thank you, everyone who contributes. Performance of The Entertainer intro song by John Primerano. And of course, this is your announcer speaking. See you next time on the Paul Leslie Hour.